The S20 will cost you around 600 bucks depending on where you get it, but I will also add those links down below. Let's go ahead and get started with both phones here. So hardware wise, as you can see, you have a glass and metal design on the V50 and you have a plastic design on the S20. Now, it's not a cheap feeling phone at all, but it definitely just doesn't feel as premium as this glass and metal phone. But they both have the same weight and they both feel definitely really good in the hand, almost about the same size. The FE20 or Fan Edition is a little bit taller, and let's see, I think it's just, they almost look about the same in thickness. It might just be slightly a little bit thicker, but going around the hardware, as you can see, power button on the V50. You also have your power button volume rocker on the S20, volume rockers on the V50, and you have a dedicated Google Assistant button on the LG V50 as well. And on the V50 you have still the headphone jack. You have no headphone jack on the FE S20. You also have stereo speakers on both of these phones as well, which we will get into, in USB Type-C. And the cool thing about the headphone jack is you also get the quad DAC as well, so you get really high quality audio on the V50. So let's talk about the displays on both of these phones. So on the V50 you have a POLED display. It's HDR10, 6.4 inches, 1440p, 538 for the PPI. On the S20 FE you have a Super AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz, HDR10 plus, 6.5 inch display, 1080p, 407 for the PPI. So as you can see, much higher PPI and resolution on the V50 as opposed to the FE, but you do have that high refresh rate on the S20, which is really nice. 120 Hz. It just makes everything smooth when you're scrolling through the home page and through applications. But what I do notice is when you look closely, you will notice that the LG V50's display is definitely a much sharper display, especially if you watch 1440p content versus 1080p, or if you're just looking at icons on the V50, you will notice that it's just a little bit sharper compared to the FE, because you just have 1440p and you have a much higher PPI, which is something that I really like. So it really comes down to personal preference here. You know, it really comes down to that, because you have the punch hole versus this notch right here, so that could also be a deciding factor for you. Now, color wise, they both look really good, very colorful. I think the Super AMOLED display might be a little bit more color accurate, because I'm looking right here and you can see this is supposed to be purple, but this actually looks a little bit like bluish purplish on this one, and this is just super accurate, just actually looks purple. So that is one thing that I noticed, but both displays are just really good. You have that trade-off. So do you want 120 Hz or do you want the higher res where you just have a, really, to me, a better looking display? Or do you want the punch hole? It gives you a more immersive experience. Or do you not mind the, notch at the top? So it really comes down to that. I can't really tell you which one is definitely better. It really comes down to the pros and cons of each display and what you want. But for me, both displays are really awesome. 9 times out of 10, I really do love 1440p displays. So I personally would probably go with the V50 here. But I really like the high refresh rate, the punch hole, and I like the colors that the Super AMOLED display gives. So both these phones are running Android 10. You have One UI 2.5 skin, and you have LG's very stripped back skin on here, also running Android 10. Both of these phones will get Android 11, of course. And basically, just to break down the difference between the skins, basically you're getting a more stock version of Android, like I said. And there are a lot of cool features with One UI and Samsung phones. Like, you get the wireless power share that this phone has. You also get the Samsung Dex experience on here. Secured folders is something that's really nice. And on the V50, it's definitely a little more stripped back. Like I said, the Hi-Fi Quad DAC is really nice. You have built-in screen recording and built-in screen sharing as well, toggles on here. And you do get the Google Now page, which I absolutely love. I just wish it was mandatory for all Android phones to have. It's such a great way to get information very quickly, and information that's relevant to what you want to see. Samsung has their I think they call it something else. It used to be the Bixby page, but it's like the Samsung News page or something like that. But I never really use it as much as the Google Now page, so I definitely prefer that. And you also have the Samsung Edge panel. You can bring up split screen multitasking really fast. There's a ton of stuff with the Samsung One UI. It's just packed with a ton of features. But if you want a more stripped back and a cleaner version of Android, then it's definitely going to be the V50 here. Gestures are really smooth on both, as you can see here, so no issues with that. Everything is just super smooth, so it really comes down to personal preference here. Alright, so you have the Snapdragon 855 and the Adreno 640 on the V50, micro SD support, 128 gigs of storage, and 6 gigs of RAM. On the FE, you also have the Exynos 990. Now, you will get the Snapdragon 865 depending on which model. This is the Exynos model, Mali G77 GPU, micro SD support, as well as 128 gigs of storage, 6 gigs of RAM as well. So let's go ahead and run a quick little speed test, and then we'll get into the benchmarks. But let's just go ahead and see a little real world test here. Let's go ahead and do Subway Surfer. Exynos got it there by a good amount of time, actually. Instagram. Looks like the V50 got it there. Shout out to Floss. Let's see. YouTube. Exynos. It's kind of going back and forth here. Let's see what else we have. Exynos. Let's try the cameras. I think that might have been a tie, but as you can see, very fast on both here. I don't think I even have it on here. Let's go ahead and check out the Geekbench scores here. Alright guys, we can see the benchmark scores here. On the S20, you can see Exynos 990, 916 versus 750, so pretty big score difference on the single core. Now on the multi-core, you actually don't have a big difference. You actually get a higher score on the V50 actually, which is pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and just go into PUBG and check out the graphics and see how that's gonna look. Alright, we are in here. Let's check out the graphics on the S20, and we're on HDR Ultra, that's as high as we can go. And on the V50, we're on HDR Ultra, and we can actually go up higher. If I download this pack, we can do the Ultra HD, and we have extreme frame rate. So it looks like the V50 is better for gaming than this Exynos chip or the Mali graphics in here. So we know it's faster. We know the S20 is faster, but this seems like to be the more powerful phone when it comes to gaming, at least. Let's go ahead and just get into a game. So now I see why people are a little iffy about the Exynos processor. If you're a gamer, I'm definitely looking for, you know, a Snapdragon phone. Yes, I can tell the difference with the frames being extreme on the V50. It just feels a little bit smoother, but they both look identical as far as graphics still. Now, once I download I don't think it finished. Yeah, it didn't finish yet, but I'm assuming you will be able to have better graphics on the V50 as well. So definitely the V50 is the better and more powerful gaming device here, as we can see. So that is really cool. But again, you do have 120 hertz. I don't know if this game is compatible with 120 hertz PUBG, but there are some 120 hertz games that look really cool, very smooth on here. So again, it really comes down to what you're looking for. Both of these phones have stereo speakers, so let's go ahead and see which one is louder, starting with the S20 FE. They both honestly sound kind of identical, but I think the S20 is a little bit louder. Yeah, it's a little bit louder, but they both like sound the same, so that's interesting. Alright, so before we get to the cameras, let's talk about some of the additional features. So both of these phones are IP68 dust and water resistant. Both of these phones have NFC, so for mobile payments, you will be able to do that, no problem. Of course, the S20 does not have a headphone jack. You have that on the V50. They both have face unlock, so that's really nice. Now, on the S20, you have in-display fingerprint scanner, works very fast. Is it faster than the physical one on the V50? No. The V50 is always like, it's going to be 100% accurate, but it is very fast for a in-display fingerprint sensor, so I have to give it credit for that. It almost never really messes up either. It's just not as fast as a physical one yet. But again, they're both really great. And you have those options to get into your phone, so that is really nice. All right, let's talk about the cameras. So on the V50, you have a 12 megapixel wide, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. You get 4K 30 or 60 FPS. You actually have a dual camera setup up front, 8 megapixel standard and a 5 megapixel ultra wide for group selfies and stuff like that. That shoots in 1080p. On the S20 FE, you have a 12 megapixel wide, 8 megapixel telephoto, 12 megapixel ultra wide, 4K 30 or 60 FPS, and a 32 megapixel selfie camera, but that shoots in 4K and it shoots in 30 or 60 FPS. Basically, from the still images that I took, these cameras are almost identical in terms of quality. Detail is almost identical. It really comes down to color and stuff like that. So Samsung gives you this more punchy, oversaturated color, and on LG you get a more realistic color. It almost pretty much nailed how it actually looked in real life. And it really comes down to personal preference. Again, I like the more natural looking colors, but sometimes I do like that kind of pop look depending on what I'm taking a picture of. So it really comes down to that. But as far as image quality, as you can see from these two phones, it's not really a huge difference here. Now you do have that 4K on the front facing camera, but the V50 has that extra camera, the extra wide angle lens. So again, it really comes down to that. So I'm not seeing a huge difference between both of these phones, which is, I guess, really good on the V50 being an older flagship and being much cheaper as well. So I thought that was really cool to see. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about battery life. So you have a 4,000 milliamp battery on the V50. It's 18 watt fast charging. You also have wireless charging. 4,500 milliamp battery on the S20. 25 watt fast charging, so this phone charges much faster. And you also have fast wireless charging at 15 watts and reverse wireless charging on the S20. So I get the same battery life on both of these phones because I'm not on 5G, so I'm assuming if you get on 5G on these phones, the battery life is going to get cut significantly, but you're looking at around 8 hours to 30 minutes on the V50. I've seen drain tests of the S20 going to 10 hours of screen on time, but again, if you're on 5G, you're not gonna get that at all. You might get around 5 to 6 hours. So great battery life on both. You can definitely get through a day and a half on these phones, going hard, no problem. So two excellent phones. Very impressed with the V50. It's just aging like it's aging like fine wine with the 5G and just the specs and everything. I just absolutely love it. This is a great phone for Samsung fans as well. Which one would you guys pick? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.